Hi, Dara Ryder here from Ahead with a quick introduction to the structure of the UDL guidelines. When you first view them, you might feel it's a little daunting or confusing looking at these guidelines, but the guidelines are actually structured in a way that make them easy enough to unpick. At the highest level of the framework, we have the three principles of UDL. The first principle calls for educators to provide multiple means of engagement to ensure that they can tap into the motivations and experiences of all our learners and get them interested in what we are teaching. So it's all about the why of learning. The second principle is to provide multiple means of representation, where we make sure that we represent knowledge in different ways and ensure that all learners have options that help them to internalize the what of learning. In other words, the actual content that we're delivering. The third principle is to provide multiple means of action and expression, which ensures that we give all learners options for how they show what they know in assessment and in how they express themselves in the classroom. Each principle has a colour. For example, the engagement principle is green, and related information is represented vertically on the guidelines. The principles each contain three guidelines which help us to implement that principle. For example, the engagement principle contains guidelines which talk about providing options for recruiting the interest of our learners, options for sustaining their effort and persistence, and options for how they self-regulate to reflect and stay the course. Each guideline is numbered for easy reference. Note that all of the guidelines start with providing options for learners in some way, which is a key tenet of UDL. Helpfully, each guideline contains a deeper level of useful practices which help us to implement the guideline. These are called checkpoints because they help us to check in and reflect on our practice. These are also numbered in relation to the guideline they sit under for reference. So under Guideline 8 about sustaining effort and persistence, the first checkpoint about heightening the salience of goals and objectives is numbered checkpoint 8.1. What's really handy is that if you click on any of these guidelines or checkpoints, you'll find an easy explainer guide, and my favourite part, you can further explore the amazing body of evidence which underpins each guideline and checkpoint by clicking the research button. Returning to the guidelines for a moment, while each principle is organised vertically, there is also a horizontal relationship between the guidelines in each principle, which tells you something about their purpose. The top layer of the guidelines are labelled access guidelines because the practices associated with them ensure foundational access for all learners to the knowledge and challenges our programs offer. If you like, they open the front door to learning. Now that they're in the front door, the second layer of guidelines are labelled build because they ensure learners have the scaffolds they need to build on that access and actually understand the knowledge and challenge. The third layer of the guidelines are labelled internalize guidelines because they go a step further and develop deeper critical thinking, complex comprehension skills, and the ability to be strategic. The last piece of the puzzle in the structure of the UDL guidelines are the goals of each principle. It's important to say that one of the overarching goals of the framework is to support educators to develop expert learners. That is, learners who not only gain a mastery in the subject-based knowledge we have to offer, but also develop a greater mastery of learning itself, developing skills which can be applied in any field or setting. The principal goals help to point us to the role each principle and its associated checkpoints and guidelines plays in that wider picture of developing expert learners. Implementing the engagement principle, for example, helps us to create purposeful and motivated learners. The representation principle, resourceful and knowledgeable learners, and the action and expression principle, learners who are strategic and goal-directed. If this seems like a lot right now, remember that nobody, not even the UDL experts, are using each and every one of these checkpoints in their work. In fact, I'd encourage you to start small and don't try too much too soon. Pick just a few checkpoints that resonate with you to explore initially, and before you know it, you'll be applying them as second nature within your work, leaving time for you to dig deeper. Start with points in your teaching where students struggle and explore which checkpoints might help to offer greater motivation, understanding, and communication opportunities.